What if the Titanic never really sank? Picture it. April 1912, the unsinkable ship, the Titanic, sinks on its maiden voyage. But what if everything we've been told was a lie? What if the real Titanic was safe and sound while its sister ship, the RMS Olympic, was sent to a watery grave instead? A grand deception, all for the sake of an insurance scam. This is the Titanic switch theory, and it's time to dive into the icy depths of this chilling tale. Let us first meet our twin protagonists, the RMS Titanic and her sister ship, the RMS Olympic. Both were majestic vessels, conceived and built by the same parents, the illustrious White Star Line and the talented draughtsmen of Harland and Wolff in Belfast. The Titanic and Olympic were almost identical twins, sharing a striking resemblance in their dimensions, layout, and luxurious trappings. Both were designed to be the epitome of comfort and opulence, boasting features unparalleled in their era. From grand staircases to sumptuous dining halls, they were floating palaces destined to conquer the waves. However, beneath this glittering facade, the White Star Line was grappling with financial pressures. The construction of these colossal ships was a Herculean task that required a staggering amount of resources. The Olympic, the elder of the two, had already begun to drain the company's coffers, even before her maiden voyage. And then there was the Titanic, an even more ambitious project, promising to further strain the company's finances. This was a time of fierce competition in the transatlantic shipping industry. The White Star Line was in a desperate race against rivals like Cunard Line, who boasted their own behemoths, the Lusitania and the Mauretania. The pressure was mounting, the stakes were high, and the company was teetering on the brink of financial ruin. But what if the company's desperation led to an unthinkable plot? So, how does a seemingly unsinkable ship sink on its maiden voyage? It's a question that has perplexed historians, engineers, and casual observers alike for well over a century. The Titanic's tragic fate seems almost too catastrophic to be true. A vessel touted as the pinnacle of maritime engineering, destined to redefine ocean travel, ends up at the bottom of the Atlantic on its first journey. A sudden disaster, a night of terror, and more than 1,500 lives lost in the icy depths. A tragedy of epic proportions, or an elaborate deception? Let's delve deeper into the murkiness of this tale. The Titanic was the second of 3 Olympic-class ocean liners built by the White Star Line. The first was the RMS Olympic, a ship virtually identical to the Titanic, but with a slightly longer service history. Now, here's where the plot thickens. Some theorists suggest that the ship that sank on that fateful night in April 1912 was not the Titanic, but its sister ship, the Olympic, cunningly disguised as the Titanic. The motive? An audacious insurance scam. The Olympic had been involved in a few accidents, and the damages were starting to pile up. The White Star Line, it's proposed, saw an opportunity to recoup their losses. They allegedly switched the 2 ships and sent the damaged Olympic out to sea as the Titanic, intending it to meet a premeditated doom. This theory, while shocking, does raise some intriguing questions. Why was the Titanic's departure delayed multiple times, providing ample opportunity for a switch? Why were numerous high-profile individuals who had booked passage suddenly cancel their trips? And why does photographic evidence appear to show discrepancies in the Titanic's features compared to the Olympics? But how could such a massive switch be possible? We'll delve into that in the next scene. The Titanic switch theory may seem far-fetched, but as we peel back the layers of this maritime mystery, the waters of truth become even murkier. Stay tuned as we unravel this deep-sea deception. Imagine 2 identical ships, one doomed, the other destined for glory. The Titanic, a marvel of the modern world, and the Olympic, her slightly older sister. According to this theory, the 2 were switched in a grand act of deception. But how, you might ask? Well, let's delve into the intriguing details. The Titanic and the Olympic were near identical twins, both born from the ambitious vision of the White Star Line. Yet there were subtle differences. For instance, the Olympic had 16 portholes on her forward sea deck, while the Titanic had 14. Now here's where things get interesting. Photographs taken of the supposedly doomed ship just before her departure show a ship with 16 portholes, not 14. Could this be the Olympic masquerading as the Titanic? Furthermore, the Olympic had been involved in a few accidents prior to the Titanic's maiden voyage. The most significant one was a collision with the HMS Hawk, leaving her with structural damage that some argue was beyond repair. But the White Star Line couldn't afford to lose their investment. So they hatched a plot to switch the two vessels. The damaged Olympic would be disguised as the Titanic, sent off on a doomed voyage, and sunk to claim insurance money. The real Titanic, now masquerading as the Olympic, would continue in service, effectively giving the White Star Line their money's worth. It's a chilling theory, isn't it? A theory that suggests a disregard for human life so profound that it's difficult to comprehend. But of course, theories are just that, theories. They're not fact until proven. So the Olympic sails into the abyss while the real Titanic lives on. But what's the evidence? In the next part of our exploration, we'll scrutinize the evidence that supports this audacious theory. Stay tuned, my friends, as we continue our journey into the mysterious depths of the Titanic switch. The proof, they say, is in the details. What are these details that the supporters of the Titanic switch theory point to, you ask? Let's delve in. The first piece of evidence comes from photographs taken before the Titanic's ill-fated voyage. Conspiracy theorists argue that certain structural differences between the Titanic and her sister ship, the Olympic, visible in these images, suggest that the ship that actually sank was the Olympic. They point out disparities in the number of portholes and slight variations in deck design that don't match up with the official blueprints of the Titanic. Then there's the matter of testimonies. Some crew members who survived the sinking reportedly made offhand remarks that hinted at a switch. One such comment was from a stoker who supposedly said, "I signed on for the Olympic, not the Titanic." Now, this could have been a simple mistake, or a reflection of the common confusion between the two nearly identical ships. Or it could be a clue pointing to a covert operation. There's also the question of the propeller. The Titanic was fitted with a brand new, state-of-the-art propeller just before her maiden voyage. Yet, when the wreckage was discovered, the propeller bore the serial number of the Olympic. Could this be an oversight in the grand scheme, or just another piece of the puzzle? Conspiracy theorists also point to the financial motivations of the White Star Line. The Olympic had been involved in a couple of accidents and was in need of expensive repairs. They suggest that the company saw an opportunity to rid themselves of the damaged vessel while cashing in on the insurance payout for the unsinkable Titanic. But the question remains, is this compelling evidence or a case of seeing what we want to see? Each piece of evidence, taken on its own, could be dismissed as a coincidence or an error. But when we piece them together, they form a narrative that is hard to ignore. Yet, can we trust this narrative, or are we simply victims of our own fascination with conspiracy and intrigue? So, did the Titanic truly sink, or is it a tale of deceit and desperation? We've explored the Titanic switch theory, a controversial proposition that presents the sinking of the reputedly unsinkable RMS Titanic as a deliberate act of subterfuge. According to this theory, the ship that met its icy demise in the North Atlantic wasn't the Titanic at all. Instead, it was her sister ship, the RMS Olympic, dressed in Titanic's garments and sent on a doomed voyage. The motive? A grand insurance scam to recoup losses from the Olympic's previous mishaps. The theory paints a vivid picture of an elaborate con, complete with switcheroos and cover-ups. It's a story that could have been lifted straight from a pulp fiction novel. We've seen alleged photographic evidence of discrepancies in the ship's construction, claims about the Olympic's damaged state, and even whispers of insiders who supposedly knew about the switch. But what if this theory were true? What would it mean? For starters, it would rewrite a significant chapter of maritime history. It would also cast a shadow over the reputations of the White Star Line and their insurance companies. But perhaps most importantly, it would mean that the deaths of more than 1,500 people were not merely the result of a tragic accident, but a calculated sacrifice made in the name of financial gain. Of course, this is all hypothetical. The evidence supporting the Titanic switch theory, while intriguing, is far from conclusive. Skeptics argue that the supposed anomalies can be explained by other means and that the theory relies heavily on speculation and circumstantial evidence. The Titanic disaster remains shrouded in mystery and intrigue, a tale of human ambition gone awry, Or perhaps a carefully orchestrated act of deception for financial gain? You decide.